Have you ever wondered why, while the world suffers from endless wars and conflicts, the richest people on the planet only keep getting richer? The answer is right in front of us, but not everyone notices it. In January of this year, something unprecedented happened in Davos, Switzerland. Normally, the conversations there revolve around climate change and visions of a bright future. But this time, behind closed doors, they were discussing something very different: the end of the existing world order. Imagine a company that manages assets worth $10 trillion. That is more than the entire GDP of Germany and Japan combined. They don't need an army. They don't need elections. They already own shares in almost every major corporation in the world. The media scares us with headlines about a possible World War III, but the real war has already begun. And this war is not about territory. It is about control over whatever comes after the dollar. Let's look at the global system that formed after 1945. China became the world's factory. Japan took on the role of the global creditor, keeping interest rates near zero and providing liquidity to the global economy. Europe became the main consumer, effectively trading its industrial strength and military power for stability and social prosperity. And the United States remained the country that kept the entire structure running, acting as the system's foreman. In its hands was the petrodollar, the world's reserve currency, backed by the power of the military-industrial complex. The rules were simple. If you wanted to trade or receive funding to develop your economy, you had to accept the system. And the system had one core rule: use dollars to buy energy, and do not go against the interests of the United States. The petrodollar guaranteed that the world would always need the American currency to purchase energy. The military ensured enforcement through power. Financial institutions and central banks controlled the flow of money. The principle was simple: power proves the rules. The system worked flawlessly. Play by the rules and you gain access to global investment markets and protection. Break the rules and you face sanctions or direct military intervention. Now let's look at this from the perspective of Americans. If you were wealthy or even middle class, you benefited indirectly from this system. American corporations earned enormous profits. Investors made money and could count on a comfortable retirement. But if you were a poor American, things looked very different. The United States effectively outsourced millions of jobs. Supply chains moved to countries like China. Factories closed. This led to massive concentration of wealth among elites and the slow destruction of the middle class. America stopped producing goods. Instead, it became dependent on other countries. The only things the United States continued to produce were money and technology. For a long time, the world functioned exactly like this. On paper, the system still exists today, but it is clearly approaching its end. Now, let's move to the present day. A group of countries decided to unite and declare something bold. We will create our own system. By 2026, these countries have accumulated enough power that the old system of enforcement through force no longer works. Forcing compliance is becoming impossible. The only remaining option would be a third world war, and of course, nobody wants that. So in January, at the World Economic Forum in Davos, the people who truly hold global power essentially admitted something extraordinary. The game is changing. For decades, the forum promoted a simple idea: move production offshore, find the cheapest labor, and the world will become a better place. But reality tells a different story. This strategy left America behind and cost millions of Americans their jobs. And now the consequences are unfolding. Japan is forced to bring capital back home and sell U.S. Treasury bonds. China, India, and many other countries are doing the same. This weakens the dollar, because the dollar requires constant global demand, and that demand is slowly disappearing. Europe has learned a harsh lesson as well. If you depend on other countries for energy and outsource your security, you eventually lose the power to dictate the rules. At moments like this, one truth becomes very clear. Control over resources determines everything. As long as capital is mobile, there is room to maneuver. But the moment restrictions appear, power fades very quickly. Now let's return to the forum in Davos. The central question discussed there was simple. How will power be divided in the new world order? To answer that, we must first identify the main players. The first group of players is the so-called financial globalists, also known as transnational capital. These are people who do not swear allegiance to any flag. Their loyalty is not to a country, it is to capital itself. And capital can exist anywhere. At the very top of this hierarchy of power are asset managers. 4 giants dominate this space: BlackRock, Vanguard, JP Morgan, and State Street. Together, they manage tens of trillions of dollars. They don't need an army. They don't need elections. They already own shares in almost every major public corporation in the world. The media scares us with headlines about a possible World War III, but the real war has already begun. And this war is not about territory. It is about control over whatever comes after the dollar. The second group of players consists of sovereign leaders. These are leaders of states that possess nuclear weapons. Their goal is not to win the globalization game. Their goal is to build strong, independent states. Sometimes they're even willing to sacrifice economic growth in exchange for sovereignty. For example, Vladimir Putin, Xi Jinping. For such leaders, exchange rates matter far less than control over natural resources, energy, industry, and security. From the perspective of pure capital, sovereign leaders are inefficient and unpredictable, but they remain popular with voters because they promise something simple: order, stability, control. The third group of players consists of technocrats. For them, the conflict between globalists and sovereign states is secondary. Their priorities are different: efficiency, scale, networks. Technocrats believe that technology will eventually replace many functions currently performed by governments. They build systems like digital identity, automation, artificial intelligence, and data networks. But here's the key detail. Technocrats rarely control financial flows themselves. They depend on funding, which means they are willing to work with almost any power center. And here lies the paradox. As globalization collapses, technocrats become even more powerful. Why? Because financial capital is increasingly investing in technologies like automation, AI, digital identity, and social scoring systems. Finally, there is the military-industrial complex. This is the enforcement layer of the system. Its power is built on force, intelligence services, and defense contracts. It thrives on instability. Instability justifies military spending. Military spending enriches defense corporations, and those corporations ultimately serve the interests of the financial system. So what do each group actually want? Asset managers want programmable money and fully digital financial markets. Banks want to remain relevant and prevent the privatization of money. That is why central banks are working on CBDCs, central bank digital currencies. The crypto industry wants open competition. Sovereign leaders want control over their own resources and regional stability. Technocrats want access to funding, data, and government contracts. And the military exists to enforce whatever system ends up dominating. Which brings us to the final conclusion.
The old world, built on the dominance of the dollar and the principle of power enforcement, is slowly fading. Attempts to revive the globalization model of the 1990s have failed, and the key players in Davos have already acknowledged this reality. The outlines of the future are becoming increasingly clear. We are moving towards a system where real power belongs to those who control digital financial flows and those who control physical resources. But the biggest question remains unanswered. What place will yesterday's leaders occupy in this new world order? Europe, having lost energy independence, risks losing its ability to shape global rules. And the United States faces a paradox. While American financial corporations are leading the construction of the new system, the country itself is gradually losing its exceptional status.
The transformation has already begun, and there is no way back to the old world order.